want to ask you just what do you do at Google? What's your mission?
So I run the creative works team here in Canada. I've been at Google for about 8 years, and my primary role is to help creative agencies and brands do the best work they possibly can do on YouTube and all the other Google platforms.
Do you find that most of it is on, like creatively, is like most of the work for you is on YouTube?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over the last 2.5, 3 years, the shift is really pushed into like video advertising. A lot of it was like what cool stuff could we be doing with Google. It's like, using Google Maps in unique ways, AR, VR, all of that. Machine learning was a huge topic, but it really has now focused in on, video advertising and the content.
And YouTube, it's been around 17 years, long time. Can you talk a bit about the content? What was the original content on YouTube and how has it changed to today?
Well, what was interesting, I like to use this point. Imagine at one time there was only one video on YouTube, right? And there was. Now we're getting something like 500 hours of video content uploaded every minute, right? So it's a huge sea of content coming up. And what's really changed is just how creators have figured out like how to be discoverable. Like, how do I actually make a living off of this thing? And, we're on chart to have YouTube billionaires right now. So if you look like a guy like Mr. Beast and, old school PewDiePie, these guys figured out the secret sauce. Like, how do I produce the content that I can build an audience with, but then also get people to stay interested in this work, right? Because there's a huge, people look at YouTube creators as a lot of nonsense. If you look at PewDiePie, 7 or 8 years ago, it's like this guy's playing video games, he's like bro fisting the screen. That was a formula, right? They use YouTube analytics to understand what's going to keep their audience going. So if you look at, some of the latest round of creators like a Mr. Beast, everything from his thumbnails to how they're created, to how things are written, to how the stories unfold. And we find brands who take advantage and learn from all of these things are also having the same success that a YouTube creator would have. Stories are timeless, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is how people absorb those stories have changed, right? Because everybody's fighting for attention these days, right? Everybody had the narrative like people have the attention span of like goldfish. No, people just watch what they want to watch.
Yes.
Because if you look at like how many times have you binged something on Netflix or anything like that, right? Like, during the pandemic, my son watched Peaky Blinders 6 times, and like almost back to back. Like, people will, but you have to construct those stories in new ways. Like, how do you grab that attention right off the bat? How do you summarize like what this video is about in the first, 6 or 7 seconds? And then how do you draw them into that longer form, right? And then how do you use the data to inform like this is the stuff that people are actually interested in? How can I double down on that? And then how long does it take until that burns out and I have to start changing up that message?
So content's changed. Creators are getting better at understanding how the machine works and how to construct those stories to keep attention. How has YouTube evolved kind of the ad side of the platform from an advertising perspective?
It's crazy. When I started almost 8 years ago to the day, it was really simple. You had TrueView, like forced 30s, or skippable ads. That was it. Now we have like a whole array, like everything from bumpers, TrueView for action, you name it. And then also the marketing objectives are all baked into this. And now the insights that we're getting are through the roof, with Insights Finder. So the complexity is crazy. But creatively, as a creative director, as you spend the time to learn it, you're like, oh my God, this is so powerful, right? And then now a lot of time spent like helping creatives figure out how that idea is articulated, because still a lot of things are written for a 30-second spot. Some campaigns I've worked on have like 200-300 versions of a piece of creative, all based on marketing objectives and where the person is within the funnel. So it sounds complex, but once you get into it, it's not really. It's just a whole new way of advertising.
And when you say 300, do you mean like 300 6-second spots?
No, it's a combination of all different formats, right? So we can start off with an awareness campaign, so very much like brand storytelling, and then get that person interested in that brand. Then if I'm interested, you can follow through with like some more mid-funnel, like education sort of stuff. And if they've gone through that phase, well, then you can start selling. Before, in my past life, working on any car stuff, you'd have to like get them to fall in love with the car. Then you would tell them about the 4 features you need to have in that spot. And then you had to show some happy families, dealership, offer, and that's all happening in 30 seconds. And the consumer's like, this is brain mush. like, I'm out of here. Give me a story that I love. Show me the value of this product, and then drive action is really kind of how to go. And if you don't like that first spot, we've got technologies now with video ad sequencing. If you skip, we can change up the messaging to find a better way of approaching you.
And I remember watching some ads, and I think it was by Charity Water, and I'm pretty sure it was like a 28 minutes. It was like a really long form. Like it was a whole story. It sucked me in. I think I watched, I don't know if I watched the whole thing, but I certainly watched like half of it. And from an advertising perspective, is it about, you can find tons of best practices online, be short, be long, like all these things. Is it just about telling a great story irregardless of length, or is length play a factor too?
So when we come to duration of advertising within YouTube, it's really like, how long do you have to be? It's that, people say, what's the best length? Well, like, how long's a piece of string, right? It's like, what do you have to say? And just be very concise on like what you have to do and make sure that it's engaging. Because the second you start getting boring and people can skip and do something else, they're just going to do so.
So is it like a long form, like, yeah, clearly it's an objective related thing. 6 seconds, I imagine, is like awareness and like, hey, we exist. And like the long form, would that be more of the like
brand building, love
Yeah.
sort of thing? It does really well. Like 2 to 3 minutes is a lot of time to be spending with the consumer. And if you can do that in a really engaging story, they're going to love you. But on the flip side, if you think of the bumpers, right? When we know where people are within their consumer journey, well, bumpers are amazing for awareness, but they can also be amazing reminders. So if I've fallen in love with that story, well, you can hit with a whole series of like reasons to believe with the bumper ads afterwards. Because what I'm trying to do is, agencies usually take a 60, cut it to 30, we'll make a 15, and then a 6, and it's the same. It's the same story, just shorter. We want to change that story as you go through that journey, and then not repeat, but also like enhance the experience.
Right. So I'm getting a bit tactical, but I'm just curious. So in your recommendation, would you say, okay, creatives, your task is actually to think about a story first from a 6-second point of view and then build and build and build?
No, first what's your marketing objective that you're trying to do? Start with that and then figure out what the story is, right? And it's very much come up with your traditional script, storyboard, and then we'll go through like a brainstorming process on like, okay, based on what your objectives are, what your creative idea is, I think this is the right media mix of how to approach it. Like if you build like a 2-minute story, well, we found if you actually run bumpers to tease it, people will watch that story more because they know what to expect from that. And then you could follow up with RTBs afterwards, because you didn't want to cloud your story with all of these, reasons to believe type of stuff. And then you start checking that box afterwards, which creatives aren't thinking that way yet. But when they do, it's like magic.
Right.
And you talked a bit about 400 variations, like tons of variations, and executing that through YouTube. And is the goal of variations to get to personalization, to get to, you said if I skip something, they might try a different feature, and then kind of, if I'm interested in that, then I follow that journey. Is this all just a big movement towards greater personalization online at scale?
Yeah, totally. Personalization is proven that it's just more effective. And it's like, think of like old direct mail stuff with your name on it. You're like, oh my God, they knew it's Mike. Right? But now we can find like, hey, am I like life stage events? Am I getting married? Am I buying a house? Is it springtime? Hey, that ad's now relevant to what I'm doing. And I've started to click around. I've started researching. Now that message starts morphing into like being more useful to what I'm actually doing. That's really the trend in personalization. It's not so much like your name per se, but like what you're trying to achieve and trying to be helpful to achieve those goals.
And how are brands actually doing that? I feel like there's a logistical question that I have of like, how are you making 400 variations? Like how is that not really overwhelming? But even like before that, how are brands finding out where people are in their life journey and like knowing what types of personalizations to offer in advance?
Again, it gets quite complex in the upfront, but we've been at personalization for at least 5 years. So our latest product is Ads Creative Studio. It's kind of like the grown-up version of Director Mix. We start on like trying to identify who are we talking to, right? What are the audiences that we're talking to? And then kind of work out like where do we want to touch them within their lives? And it's a really neat brainstorming thing that happens. So very often we'll have the media agency, creative agency, then ourselves kind of sit down and just like talk about like, what are you trying to do? What kind of things do you want to get? Because there's endless amount of data points that we can use creatively. Like one of my favorite campaigns is done by IKEA. They're selling a mattress. And it could tell like if I'm searching cat videos at 11 o'clock at night, and if I was, I get the video saying, hey, sleepyhead, what are you doing up at 11 o'clock at night watching cat videos? Bad mattress, come to IKEA. All those little touch points of magic, like knowing roughly what time it is, what kind of videos I was doing, then playing that with a good creative idea, like that's like the kind of the secret sauce, like the nice little touch of magic.
I love that.
You need an accent to make that video.
I was gonna do it, but you're recording it. So in my live presentation, I'm doing the Swedish guy.
So our audience might recognize that there's a new feature on YouTube Shorts. And I think it's off of kind of that short video format, vertical video. How does that fit into the mix? Like how are brands thinking about that?
They're just starting, to be honestly, starting to think about this, like even doing vertical video is a bit of a challenge because like, oh my God, I have to make another thing. Can I just like squeeze a horizontal sort of thing in there? And we've all seen it. It looks like garbage. But brands are starting to embrace different ways of producing things because vertical formats are a thing now between TikTok, Shorts, but mobile devices. Like 70% of like a lot of the brands like videos on YouTube are now watched on a phone. And when you do look at how you produce your content, like before you even like shoot anything, have you storyboarded what the vertical version of it looks like? Some recent work that I saw was kind of brilliant. It was done by A&W. You can tell in the production that they used like a line right down the middle of the screen. And you could almost see all the safety zones for vertical and horizontal and when they shot it. So they didn't have to shoot additional things. They just were smart about their pre-planning up front. And then they're able to have all the stuff. And it's very easy to do variations when you plan. There's nothing worse than someone sending over like a spot to us and it's like, hey, how do we make this for Shorts? We can take it to the editing. We can take it to the editing studio. We can patchwork it. But if you would have planned up front, just think of all the efficiencies or how much more. Because a lot of agencies and clients is like, I can't afford to do all these things. It's like, well, you can because you're also wasting a lot of time by thinking about things in the old way of doing things.
And maybe let's talk about the resource side of this. I'm sure our audience hears 400 variations. I need to think about vertical, horizontal brand stories that are X amount of minutes and many pieces. How does it cost a lot? Like, should our smaller brands be like, I don't know what to do. Like we're gonna compete against giants who have crazy budgets, or how do you think about the side of resourcing?
I like brands that are scrappy, right? Like if you're like this giant auto manufacturer, you've got these massive budgets and you can continue doing things how you've always done it. And if it doesn't work, you can just move on and do something else. If you look at like a lot of these startups, like really scrappy brands, like the mattress category, right? Like all the Endies and whatnot, like these guys live or die on what they do online because they don't have giant TV budgets. So they just like throw caution to the wind as like, let's use the platform how it is. We don't worry about production value. Like it's not saying it's crappy content. It's just that they don't have like, a crew of 50 people shooting these things because you don't have to on YouTube. You just have to be really engaging or offer a lot of value to it. So kind of take your old marketing hat off and think of like, if I'm a startup and if I have that startup mentality on YouTube, you can do amazing things. Now getting to things like Ads Creative Studio, the automation side of the business, a lot of creatives like, I hate automation. I don't like machine learning. I don't like all this stuff because it takes away from the craft. My response to that is like, as you're telling your cinematic story, there are marketing objectives that you have to do. There's credit cards that need to be signed up for, all of those different things. A lot of the tools we have can do that heavy lifting for you so you're not spending all your time doing all these variations. Essentially, if you have Ads Creative Studio, you create your framework for your spot. You know what the variables are, so if the offer needs to change, a piece of video or audio changes, you build it once, then literally someone can just go and type in what the changes are, boom, all those changes go out. And if it has a good creative set of eyes on it from the get-go, it is going to be good work. and it happens fast. That gives you more time to do the other things that you really want to craft and, and dig into. Because I find it's in either or. I'm doing 200, 300 variations and I'm forgetting about the brand piece, or I'm doing the brand piece and I'm forgetting about all these other things. The whole thing's designed to allow you for the heavy lifting to go away, so you can do both.
And it sounds like version 3 of this Creator Studio from, I forget the original name. It's an interesting name.
Director Mix
Yeah.
from Vogon.
From Vogon. And I'm assuming this is a continuous roadmap. Like if we fast forward 5 years from now, technology is going to continue to play a really important role in executing great creative on YouTube.
So with Vogon, you literally had to have a Google engineer, like the guys who would be building product.
Right.
With Director Mix, it made it that you didn't need all that technical thing. It became more like a WordPress sort of thing, but you needed support from somebody at Google to build the campaigns for you. As Creative Studio, it's a tool now. Any agency can now grab it, build their own campaigns. There's no minimum spend. Do it. If you do spend, over a certain threshold, we do have support that can walk you through all these different things. So it's gotten way more easy. It's like a Photoshop type of thing.
Yeah. And it's great. We talk about humanology a lot here, our philosophy of kind of having technology work together with human insights and creative to drive kind of the best ideas, the best execution. And when partners like yourself bring these new tools to market, help us as agencies work better to have the right objectives up front, define what we need instead of being kind of reactive after we're proactive. I think this is when the magic happens. This is when we can actually drive really great results. We've seen it with our clients going all in on YouTube. So it's exciting to hear that we have technology like this, and this is where the future is. It's like the marriage of these two things is really important. And just curious, do you think, I'm gonna lean into this question here. Should we really have, should we spend as much time as possible on getting the best story we can to tell to our audience, or should we work really hard in the technology and get as many variations as possible and make it work longer for us? Like, if we're gonna spend more time, where should we be spending it?
Technology should be seamless. Like, a consumer doesn't care how many versions of whatever you have. They just want to make sure that you get the right version to them at the right time, right? But if you spend so much time on the story and you forget about the technology that can empower it, you can fail there also. Because if you don't look at the data on how great stories are told, you may construct your thing completely wrong. One of the most disappointing times for me is Christmas in advertising, because I get to see these beautiful 2-3 minute cinematic pieces that run on YouTube, and they're made for cinema screens, right? And organically, people will watch them because my friend has sent me this video. It's like, check out this latest thing, and it's great, and I'll watch it. But when you see those as ads, they fail because you start with a very slow story arc. You build up to something. Well, I've already skipped that, right? So like, how do you front load that story to grab my attention? Follow like what a creator would do. And when you do, that's when, but you can't get there without like actually looking at the data, using YouTube analytics to understand what great stories look like that perform well on YouTube. So I talk a lot about this, best practice. We've got a framework called the ABCDs. I personally hate the name because it trivializes the creative process. That being said, the program's been around for 6-7 years now, and we've had continuous learning. So we've had creative directors across the globe looking at work and recognizing the patterns of what creative resonates and which doesn't. And it's more from the production and how you craft the story, right? Like how you pace, how do you frame, how do you shoot everything is really key into that. That should not dictate what your creative output should be. So when I sit down with a creative group to talk about, like, okay, we're talking about best practice, we're going to tell you these, 4 things that you really have to think about, and under those 4 things, there's another 5 things that you have to do. I use an example of this latest Sick Kids advertising versus a Pringles ad. Both of them follow best practice to the T. One makes you cry, one makes you hungry, right? And it's really on the creatives to like look at the framework that we have and how do I best articulate that, right? Like I caught a lot of heat for bumper ads. How do you tell a great story in 6 seconds? There's not enough time. There's more than enough time to tell a great story in 6 seconds. You just have to be very concise. But it also means that, you know what, if you get a brief and says one bumper ad, there's no reason why you can't do 5 or 100 bumper ads, right, to tell that bigger sort of story. So media plays like a huge part of the creative process.
What are the ABCDs, by the way? What's the...
Oh, okay, the framework? Okay.
Yeah, like may as well.
I don't have my deck here now. Attract. So how do you get people's attention within the first 5 seconds? And like literally they've done thousands of experiments and studies, and they've looked at it. If you break the fourth wall and look right at the camera, you've done an interactions that will attract. If you use humans within the creative, that will attract. If you frame it, so close crops on faces work way better than wide establishing shots. That has a lot to do with mobile devices, because if you can't see what you're doing, but also like we found like a lot of what we talk about for best practices on YouTube, actually if you run it on TV, it actually works even better. So we take TV spots, we cut them and re-cut them for YouTube, and then put them back onto TV, and they perform. The next one is brand. A lot of people ask, like, when should I show my logo, mention my brand? We've got a lot of thinking around that, and it actually changes based on business objective. If I'm doing an awareness campaign and I throw my logo up right in the center, conditions tell me in my brain I have to skip that because I don't want to watch an ad. If I integrate the brand into the story and use an audio mention and then reinforce it all the way through, people will watch it because it doesn't feel like an ad, but the brand's there, it's present, right? There's nothing worse than creating a 3-minute spot and the brand only appears in the last 10 seconds because 80% of the people are not going to see what that brand is. The C would be connect through storytelling, education, things like that. Like, not every spot has to be like, this car has air conditioning. You know, you could show the benefit of that. And then the last one would be directing. And my opinion, Canadians are generally really crappy at directing at the end of a spot. Like, do I have to download something? Do I have to go to a dealership? A lot of American advertising is pushy. It tells you exactly what you're supposed to do. We don't do that. You know, we'll put a hashtag at the end of something or a tagline or a logo. But what is the next step that you want the user to do? Because it is an interactive medium.
Mr. Beast. I want to talk about him a little bit. I've seen a bunch of his videos, and often he actually starts his videos off with kind of what it's going to be about. You don't have to wonder what it's going to be about. It's like, if the guy stays in the square wearing a hat for 28 hours, he wins $1 million. Like, it's like a whole, he lets you know what's going to happen. How does Mr. Beast fit into, and creators in general, fit into best practices? Or you said they're masters of learning, like how to keep people engaged. Have they fed into the ABCDs or the 4 things? Or
yeah, they use all our tools. I like to think of YouTube as an instrument, and like Mr. Beast would be Jimi Hendrix. Like, he knows how to play it, how to break it, how to learn from it. It's quite amazing. But there are brands doing exactly what Mr. Beast is doing. You know, if you look at the work from Apple, a lot of that is following the exact same structure of, you know, explaining what's going to be happening within the first few seconds, expanding a little bit more. They use the term the messy middle, which I'm not a big fan of, but then, you know, that's the meat of what you do, and then a recap and call to action at the end. So we have what's called the traditional story arc. You start off slow, you build to a big climax, and you have a reveal. That's what advertising has been for the last 50 years. Now we have the emerging story arc, where you have to bang right up front. You got to get people's attention. Then it kind of goes down a little bit, and then bang again. And it's kind of like a clothesline that kind of goes like this. And we found when you create your creative, and this has been going back to like Old Spice Super Bowl 10 years ago type of thing, we find people just watch that. And, you know, but I want to even smash that more, because I think you don't have to follow any norms in production on YouTube. Like, if you can be completely out of the box and try something different, we have so many data points that we can tell if that's working or not. Like, also the culture of experimentation is really weak, because, you know, we have YouTube experiments. We can A/B test things in real time. So, you know, you just do it how we've always done it, and let's maybe cut it in a completely different way. You know, one automotive brand that I've worked on in the past, every spring it's tires and brakes, and they basically all have to show a picture of a tire with the price. It's like, can we try actually some storytelling and messaging, maybe some humor? Sure, but it's a high risk. A/B test the whole thing, system optimized to what's ever working. Lo and behold, like, talking to people works.
Humor works.
Right, but if you want to like recut, do something different, shoot for mobile first, you know, we have enough systems in place that we can responsibly test this. So you're not going to like lose your whole budget on this like innovative way of doing things.
Maybe we should talk about insights. So We talk to our clients a lot about if we're going to have a great idea, we need an insight to like drive that idea. We need to find it somewhere. How do you think about insights driving creative within YouTube?
I think it's insanely powerful. And we've got some great internal tools and also outward tools. So like Insights Finder, that can really teach you about what your audience is looking for on YouTube. So if I was to put the demographic in, roughly what their interests are, it will tell you what videos and content that they're looking at, what search terms go around that too. If you look at 4x4s, you think of like your latest truck commercial, you're going to see towing motorcycles, you're going to see or hear country, sort of 70s rock music going on, that helpful guy with the beard doing all this stuff. But then if you pump that information on who's buying pickup trucks and what they actually look at, they look at failed videos, UFC videos, 90s hip hop, gangster rap actually over indexes within that. So if you're talking about personalized and being relevant, well, that country music, towing the motorcycle and everything doesn't resonate. Another one that I like to think about is I was doing something for a tool company, and people were just handy enough to go out and buy the tools, but they didn't know what they were doing, so they go to YouTube and watch the how-to videos. So I started looking around, like what channels are these guys looking at, and I looked at like the top 15 channels. And every creator that was doing home improvement was like 45 to 50 years old, white, gray hair, all the same. There's a huge door where if you just have any sort of diversity in there, you're gonna really stand out. Because that's a bit of a problem too, if you look at it, that everybody looks the same, doing the same type of thing. It's like, as an advertiser, well, like that's the sweet spot where I wanna go. The simplest tool is actually predictive search. So in your search bar, start typing in. So I went and I said, best car for, boom, Uber popped up. What manufacturer has a program in to sell for Uber drivers, right? At that time, I didn't know of any. But if my wife was to go to Facebook and type in my husband is, it would actually come up the greatest, the best. He loves me, all of these things. If she was to go to Google and do it, my husband is the worst, mean to me, lazy. Because I like to say Google's the ultimate source of truth, right? Because no one's ever gone into the search bar and lied about what they're doing. Facebook, yeah, you want to project, this is who I am. I'm a good person, everything. But, with Google, you are asking like life-altering questions all the time. And we get like 500,000 searches like every 6 seconds.
It's a confessional. It's just you and Google. Facebook
it is. So there's a lot that you can learn.
Yeah.
It's like we're not learning about that one person.
Sure.
But we're learning. It's kind of like the pulse of society in the world that's happening.
That's a really good point.
And there's a cool, I think it's like a panel or a screen that has squares and it shows trends and it's
a screensaver, literally.
Yeah, and it actually shows like the trends, like what's trending on Google.
Yeah, like 1/3 of all searches each day are net new, things that have never been searched before. So it's like, agencies tend to rely on like white papers that were done like over the last 5 years. Well, like you can pull up your screensaver and say, oh my God, why is this trending? Like what's going on with here? And then how can I react quickly?
Anything else you want to share?
Just one thing I want to touch on, like Mr. Beast is like a phenomenon. He's something going on like crazy, but the Canadian ecosystem for creators is huge too. Like we have just about everything for every passion, like from home renovation to automotive to fashion to finance. It's all here in Canada, and Canada actually over indexes in creators. More people from outside of Canada actually watch our Canadian creators. So a very vibrant creator economy that's happening here too. And I don't think brands are leveraging these guys enough.
It's always the way in Canada until they leave, and then we're like, oh, okay, maybe they were okay. Maybe they were talented.
Yeah, but they also think of like, oh, we've worked with a creator. Check mark. That idea is done. The idea is not working with a creator. It's where a creator can really help you out to do something awesome. One example I like to highlight is a car manufacturer had a car packed with tech. And instead of just getting like another car vlogger doing this stuff, they actually got a technology vlogger. Someone who's really into audio acoustics and, all the gadgets. And they had that person give the review because it was a totally different, mindset to it. And then just, using that person's audience, they had, 300,000 views in a week organically because that guy's just the expert on those type of things. And those people who buy stereos also buy cars. So
Mike, thanks so much for coming out. You've shared a ton of value to our audience. some best practices. You challenged us, you've given us some platforms and tools to look into. We'll share all those in the notes, but appreciate you coming in.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's great to be here.